All right, so the first question was why do we study history, right? And remember yesterday I talked about there's three main things that you need to include in this. First one is the obvious, the piece that everybody always talks about. What is that, Avery?
Don't make mistakes.
Use it to eliminate mistakes, learn from them. And what I also said is that in answering that piece, I like to give at least three examples. Did I say three yesterday?
I don't think so, but I think you said just multiple. But
yeah, three examples of something that occurred and how that could help us not make remember I mentioned briefly yesterday about Hitler and how he didn't learn the lessons of Napoleon, and that really weakened his ability to fight America as we came in. If he had not went into Mother Russia, he decided to attack them after they had an agreement. Not a smart move. So that's one piece. The second piece is that it gives you a sense of common heritage, a sense of belonging, a sense of who you are. It's important. Identity is important. And when you don't know who you are or where you came from, or it actually hinders your ability to grow and progress. So there's a lot of people who maybe who've been orphaned or something. Always there's a reason why a lot of people always want to search from where they came from, because it does something internally to us to have a solid foundation of knowing what has transpired. The last piece, which I think is the most important piece, is what doesn't happen to us, Ethan. We don't get deceived. And the fact is that millions. And I mean, millions of people out there are purposely distorting history so that way they can push forth a particular narrative to convince you that we should have socialism or we should have this or that, and they'll twist what had occurred. But then if you're presented with those facts, oh wait. Here, look at this. They said in history this happened, so maybe this will work. But when that history is wrong, you're basing your decisions and your focus on wrong information. And whether it's your personal history or U.S. history or ancient history, all those pieces affect us. If it's distorted. Every decision we make, for the most part, is based upon the past. Our decisions are based upon our past. And so if that's wrong, then you're making some really flawed decisions or flawed votes or flawed, and so history is extremely important. It's about as, for about 80 years. And I heard him mention John Dewey in there, right? You talk about the Dewey, and I heard Dewey in there. Well, it's Dewey's fault. It is, in essence, a lot of it is his fault that people in education have said we need to have it's just practice math and science and English. That's all we need. We don't need to take any courses, just stuff that we're gonna do in our next job. Which sounds kind of good in theory, having like this practical application. But history began to become discounted over the past 80 or so years in education throughout, many degrees in college. You do not even need a history course. My wife never took a history course in college. And that's because they wanted to go. And so Dewey's the one who really kind of was the person who pushed that mentality. And there's a reason for it. If you can control people's past, you can control you can control their future. I mean, that's a H.G. Wells quote. All right. Second one was what elements brought about development of hunter-gatherer societies to civilizations, and I'm really hoping that going through this again will really solidify in your brain, and that way tomorrow I really want to see all 90 and above. All 90 above. There should be no excuse. If you're not paying attention, taking notes, Zach, I don't see it. Or I hope you're watching this video then tonight. Like really just digging Mr. Hyatt videos, which is really awkward for me to think about. Like, oh, this is so good. All right, so for a long period of beginning of human history, there was most people moved in small tribes, small groups, referred to as hunter-gatherers. They didn't stay in one place. They didn't develop. You didn't really have these large city centers. In fact, cities were not even developed yet. In order to have a city, you have to have civilization. So at a particular point in history, which is often referred to as the Neolithic Revolution, which coincides with the agricultural revolution, the starting point was agriculture. People began to see that staying put, crop rotation, which was actually a big new idea, that rotating crops helps you. It's a lot of science. Cows, corn, oats, wheat, silage, right? You rotate them in that order. That type of mentality helps replenish, and you can produce more. So once food started begin to produce more, you can then have a sustainable population, right? We see that because of a larger population, there's a need of communication. You're not just dealing with 20, 50, or 1,000 people. We see a development of language and development of a written language. Or written language, that's very important for passing along ideas, traditions, engineering, science, math, all that stuff gets passed to the next generation. Doesn't mean things cannot be passed oral history. There's things I learned from my father that were not written down. But some of it's still kind of hard to, it's vague to kind of grasp at. So like having things written down, I brought this in today. Finally brought it. Says, the writer must write what he has to say, not speak it. Goes along with what we're talking about. What does that mean is that, it's easier to forget something that's said than it is, was written down. You can always refer back to it throughout. And so that was essential for development of civilizations. We then begin to see as civilizations grew, populations grew, people begin to trade, not just locally, but distance trade, which in turn creates a level of job specification. You have different jobs, you have trades, you have merchants, you have artisans, you have people doing all that begins to kind of spread out. But it needs to be organized. So how do you organize it? How do you organize it, Caleb? How do you organize all of what we just talked about? Thank you, Avery. You have to have a government. I have to. And actually, you do have to, because there's no really examples of sustainable anarchy. That'd be a great name of a band, Sustainable Anarchy. That'd be like a great band that I could see Ethan listening to. That's like a metal band. Doesn't that sound cool?
Yeah.
I think that sounds cool. I almost named my band Broken Amp, by the way. Nobody liked it. Just me. So you have a government to organize. But again, to really hold everyone together, a set of values or a religious system needs to be in place to really kind of to bring all those pieces together. When we're talking about ancient Egypt, the pharaohs were looked as godlike figures that kind of kept them together. We go to China, we have Confucianism, Taoism, Hinduism in India. We have the Bible in Hebrew. And so there's a longing for purpose and meaning in us naturally. That's like we're designed that way, and so sometimes it comes out and manifests itself in different ways. So there, in order for a civilization to grow, these pieces all have to be in line. So we see that the hunter gatherers it was a rough, hard, sustainable life because you're living day to day. I mean, not that people during this period of time probably had a little harder than us, a little bit, but still compared to the hunter-gatherer, that's much more intensive life style. Our third question was about Egypt. Remember we talked about this earlier, Egyptian civilization. What made them become one of the greatest civilizations that has such a long-lasting impact and have we have massive monuments of pyramids that are left from thousands of years. If you think about those types of structures and that we still have them, it kind of shows the level of superiority they had to some of their contemporary cultures. What made them great first and foremost was what? The Nile River. You have to have and civilizations in general need a river source, a source of water, a source of life. And the Nile was especially good because it was very predictable. Predictability is great for business. What's one of the reasons why most people don't go into business? Because they can't predict it. Like, I would love to open up a restaurant. I love cooking. I've thought about it for years, opening up a restaurant. I almost opened up a soup shop. So like it was going to be a soup buffet.
Hyatt's Kitchen.
No. It was going to be called Soup Democracy. Yeah. I wanted to create like this whole like environment where it was like where we could have political discourse, have open discussions and something very, very Roman-esque in a modern world. So that'd be kind of cool, but maybe some sandwiches, but like have a bunch of really good soups. Nothing like a good soup.
Grilled cheese with like tomatoes.
Yeah, grilled cheese with bacon.
Oh yeah.
And tomato. Yeah. So that was important. Nile River. Second really important element was their governmental structure. We know that we live in a republic, a form of democracy, but the truth is, one of the reasons why people strayed away from democracies in this form of government for a lot, because there's a sense of instability. There's a sense when you have a ruler who's strong and in control of most elements of society, it creates a sense of order. And so that, and it carries through from pharaoh to pharaoh. I mean, there was variances, and we know that, there's different stages of Egyptian civilization, but generally the cultures remained because you didn't have a lot of opinions of people who could change it. It was a very narrow group of people who controlled the cultural aspects of society. The last piece we talked about is, having natural barriers surrounding Egypt. You had the Sahara Desert in the west. You had the Mediterranean Sea in the north. You had the cataracts to the south. You have the Red Sea in the east. So you had, a nice little boundaries. For this time period, those were very hard boundaries to penetrate. Again, in today's age, we just fly. Airplanes transformed war more than any other technological advancement, even nuclear weapons. Airplanes made distance no longer an issue, so you can do things very rapidly. And so we know that there was no airplanes. At least we think there was no airplanes. There's no archaeological. Imagine all of a sudden we found an archaeological evidence of an ancient Egyptian plane. Wouldn't that would just like throw everyone for a loop. What's that? Balloons. Well, I mean, there's elements that I know in the War of 1812. There's some balloons in the war there's a war in Switzerland like in the 1840s where some balloons were used. Yeah, 1911 was the first use of planes when Italy attacked Turkey. They used planes. That was the first circumstance of use of planes. But again, they weren't really widespread until the 20s and 30s. So they were protected. They're already fairly strong. So once you got past those barriers, you better have some people. You better have something to, and so it was very difficult to attack Egyptians. What events were surrounding the development of Confucianism and Taoism, and what dynasty put an end to this, and why? During the Eastern and Western Zhou dynasties, there's a period called what people refer to as a period of warring states. What the period of warring states was meant that really it was very fractionalized. There's multiple leaders. There's people vying for power. This is the one time in the whole, when we talk about like the dynastic cycle, where we see that the emperor having very little control, and because there's multiple emperors actually, and there was and there was a lot of fighting, a lot of civil war, and we know that civil war is traditionally probably the most difficult type of war to engage in, because oftentimes you're fighting against family members and people you know. So that's the worst. I mean, I guess in my opinion, I guess someone could have another opinion, but it feels to me that a civil war, at least sociologically, mentally, probably very difficult to go through. So we had all this chaos, and amongst the chaos, there's a group of philosophers that begin to write to these scholars about how do we deal with this chaos. You got like Confucianism, who really the focal point of his philosophy was this idea of these 5 basic relationships, and that these 5 basic relationships, if they're held in order, you have the benevolence and the submission of the two, that you would have peace in society. You have the Taoists who believe that not infringing upon nature and people, and what they refer to as the way, living in peace and harmony with everyone. That would create obviously peace will create peace. That makes that's kind of redundant. But that was a philosophy, and so that's why it was in response to what was happening. People were trying to make sense of why society was the way, and so a lot of people see them as a response to. Now, near the end of the Warring States, you see even more tension. A lot of it had to do with a lot of the scholars there's a lot of tension between the scholars and the leaders of China in regards to how to run the country. Well, when the Qin dynasty elevated and became the dynasty of China, they just wanted to eradicate all discourse, get rid of even though that was productive and probably better than what was going on before, they saw it as a threat to order, and that the Qin was coming to regain order, and their ideas and what they're going to put forth is going to be permeate the culture. And so they killed scholars, they killed people who were perpetuating this philosophy. Yes, QIN, Chickadee China, the Chinese chicken. Right? You guys know that song, right?
No.
You know what? No. It was a song from the 90s. Surprised Blair doesn't know it. I mean, no, well, Blair likes 90s music, right? Kind of, yeah. It was very, very, very popular song. All right, and again, just to touch on the why was because they, there's a lot of scholars who were trying to perpetuate these ideas, and it was a threat to their authority. It's kind of like the same mentality. When King Herod, right? Why do you want to kill all the babies? It was a threat to his authority. People who are in rule don't like their authority threatened, and especially not the Qin. They were very emphatic on my way or the is it the highway?
Isn't it highway?
Yeah. Yeah. Making a second guess it there for a second. All right. The last question was let's compare and contrast the Minoans and the Mycenaeans. So the biggest comparisons between them is one is the type of complexes they built. they built these massive complexes for their king, for the monarchy. They're slightly different. Remember the Minoans were a little more extravagant, which is kind of because they weren't in fear of war as much, so they're much better. Why were the Minoans not in fear of war?
Because of the natural barrier.
Being an island. Now, siege warfare, again, it's one of those things that it's a very difficult thing to do. And when you don't have tanks and have the carriers bringing all the equipment to come on, it's hard because people are just waiting for you, and they can camp out. It's difficult. So, but they both had palaces. They're both known for using a lot of bronze tools. This is why it's often referred to as the Bronze Age, based upon their what they use for equipment. They both had writing systems that developed. And really, the major occupations of the two were generally trade and farming, right? Which is pretty much the major occupations of most civilizations, I would say, during this ancient period. Now, what made the Minoans different? One is because they were an island country. Most of their society was determined by that. So they're big into fishing, which would be called aquaculture, right? The fishing of the sea.
Is that actually what it's called?
They worship bulls and snakes. So they had, their sense of religion was and they saw that they looked at their king as a godlike figure. Again, I already touched on this, but their palaces were much more extravagant. They're more advanced, and the reason why because they had more time to dedicate to those, because since they were not fearful of invasion, they had more time to invest. I mean, that's you can't prove that, but that makes sense. That when you have more time on your hands, you can develop other aspects of life in a greater manner. Now, they did have their writing system was Linear A, and that was undecipherable, which makes a lot of their culture much more mysterious than the Mycenaeans. And they had homes were decorated with lots of frescoes. Remember, like all those frescoes were really depicted sea life. There's no you don't see anything about war or anything. Because war is almost always a something that we see pass through like culture, whether it's with art where people are depicting it, and there's really no depictions of war. So it really shows that was not even on the radar. The Mycenaeans are the group of people who began to develop the big temples for the Greek gods. So they believed in all the different gods that you can think of, Athena and Zeus and Apollo, all those Greek gods that you may have read about when you read the Iliad this summer, a little bit. That was a really meaner way to say that. I feel really embarrassed. They had these the palace complexes. Remember, they were different because they had these huge walls that guarded the palace complexes, and up on the hill they had these major fortifications called Acropolis that kind of protected the city, which shows that they were more in fear of war. And we know that they had a lot of invaders from the north, like the Dorians were probably their greatest nemesis. Yes. Yeah, they're more. Yeah, well, I think when you are invaded and you're in battle, you have a tendency. It creates a sense of aggression naturally. They had a linear B writing system, which has helped us decipher the works of Homer, which has given us a window into some of the culture and ideology of that time period. And that's good.
Wait, did you read the ancient history quiz?
Yes, I did.
Did you pass them back?
No, I did not.